Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Welcome to Our Hen House. We have such a great show for you. My guest is Dominique Barnes, and she is the CEO and co-founder of New Wave Foods. And you may not have heard of New Wave yet, but you're going to hear about them soon because they are really out to change the way we eat seafood. And we often like to say that here at our hen house that it's not seafood, it's sea life. Of course, we didn't invent that. We didn't invent that expression. Somebody else did, but we like to say it. And what New Wave is making really is seafood. It's not made out of formerly living creatures. So that's really pretty exciting. And I think they're going to be very big. Then Jasmine will interview Erik Marcus, who is no doubt known to many of you. He is, among other things, the founder of vegan.com, which is an absolute treasure trove of information for anyone who is vegan or is thinking of going vegan. And Erik has been in this movement for a long time and knows about a lot of different things. And today, among other things, Jasmine is going to be talking to him about self-care for activists, which is something that is of concern to all of us, I think, and it's something he knows a lot about since he did, in fact, write the book, Self-Care for Activists. So you're really going to want to hear that interview. Now, after I recorded my interview with Dominique, I was invited to a private tasting of New Wave's shrimp. When you listen to the interview, you'll understand that I have not yet experienced the product. So before I went, our new director of operations, John Frusciante, suggested that I bring my microphone and record people's impressions.
I am Amy Trakinski, and I am with the investment fund Veg Invest, and we are proud investors in New Wave.
She is eating it as we speak.
Absolutely delicious.
Texture?
Texture is strangely like shrimp. It's. How do you describe shrimp?
I know, I've been struggling with that all day. Like, how do you describe that weird thing about shrimp?
It's funny, it even has this not an aftertaste, just this sort of, it leaves you with this shrimpy kind of feel. It's delicious. I used to eat a ton of shrimp before I stopped eating shrimp when I became vegan. And this has the texture. It looks like shrimp, so already your expectation of what it's going to taste like is completely met. Absolutely delicious, and it's only improved. I had it about a year ago, an earlier incarnation, and this is really even an improvement upon that, and I thought that was fantastic.
Now, I have to tell you, doing these kinds of interviews on the fly is not really in my comfort zone. As you know, if you listen to the podcast, I am totally an introvert. My favorite way to do an interview is definitely sitting on my couch at home on Skype, audio only, so I don't have to look good and people don't have to see what I'm wearing. But obviously, this was an opportunity and a good idea, and I felt a little challenged because John is new and I didn't want him to think I was pathetic. And loads of podcasts are doing these kinds of live clips these days, and I want to be on top of things, so I did it.
My name is Kiki, and I'm here to eat some vegan shrimp, and I run a company called Veganizer, and we flip restaurants from omnivore to vegan.
So what do you think about this shrimp? Is this going to help you in your work?
Oh, totally. Every time I veganize a restaurant, we have to eliminate the shrimp dishes and just do everything else. So for the first time, now we can do a complete menu maybe except for lobster, but they're working on it. But now it just really opens up so many more doors for veganizing because we can do shrimp.
Yeah, one thing they mentioned in the presentation, which I hadn't thought of, the products that we see are mostly chopped up products, and this is really the first, I mean, it sounds disgusting to say it, but the first whole animal, which actually could be a big plus in the market.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and it's a little bit freaky because looking at it, it looks so similar, it tastes so similar, the texture is similar. I almost have like the vegan guilt of eating an animal, but it's plants. So, I mean, it's having your cake and eating it too, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of vegans go through that. I, on the other hand, if I know it's made out of plants, I'm good. I don't know. I guess I'm not that sensitive a soul.
Yeah, well, for sure, for anybody who's got a vegan girlfriend and an omnivore boyfriend, this is going to be such a blessing for them as a couple. For anybody who is considering going vegan but just can't give up the fish, this is a brilliant, solution for that person. So this is just going to fill that gap that is preventing a lot of people from going plant-based because it's a huge market that has never been tapped into before.
So, the shrimp. I was at this tasting. It was served on chips with a chipotle sauce. I actually took one and wiped the sauce off so I could really get a feel for the flavor of the shrimp itself. And there was a real fishy, shrimpy taste. They also had a fried version. Imagine fried shrimp. What has ever been a more beloved food than that? I'm sure there are many vegans who will be happy to be able to get back to having fried shrimp. You'll be able to buy it frozen, and I guess you'll just heat it up. I'm not sure. Being me and the worst cook imaginable, I didn't actually get the cooking instructions. But while I was there, I also spoke with Dominique's partner, Michelle Wolf.
The next step for New Wave, we're just working on making thousands and thousands of pounds of it so we can get to those retail stores and developing packaging. We're targeting the first quarter of next year. You should be able to see it on shelves and eat it and try it for yourself.
Of course, the reason most of the people were there at the tasting was to find out about the business side of the project. I was just there to taste the shrimp since I don't have any money to invest. And I don't know people who have money to invest. But I did learn, as a result of the fact that most of the people there were there for business reasons, I learned a lot about some of the enormous challenges in introducing a new product to the market. You know how everything is so much harder than you think it is? Like I'm just going to use my own selfish example. People seem to think that, or some people do, that because the podcast is like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours long, that takes up an hour and a half, 2 hours of my week. Well, it takes up more than that, I want to tell you. But getting back to the topic at hand, I did find out about some of the unbelievable challenges in introducing not just any new product, but this brand new concept product to a market, and in finding investors who are willing to finance what is ultimately a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I'm not kidding. This is going to be big.
Jody Rash. I run an investment fund called Veg Invest, and we're currently an investor in New Wave and looking at their new offering to see if we're going to participate in the next round.
So you had a chance to test their latest product, and what do you think? Are you happy you put your money in?
Yeah, I'm very happy with not only with the investment, but with the product development. I think the product itself is version 2.0. We invested based on 1.0, so we're even happier with 2.0, and it's got a nice kind of texture that you'd expect in shrimp, kind of a little crunchy part of it as well, and a good over flavor of a kind of that seafood flavor. I also like the fact that it's made with algae, so it still keeps kind of that seafood type of connection there. So that's all good, and I think their plan to bring this into the market is great because of all the impact it's going to have, not just on the people, but on the oceans and all the issues that there are with shrimp farming.
And I heard they're going to have a kosher shrimp as well. That's kind of an exciting development.
Yeah, doesn't matter for me so much, except that I think it'll help with the expansion and just making products really that everyone can eat, which is, I think, the greatest thing about having vegan products, that they're very inclusive. People who have allergies to dairy or seafood and all that, they'll be able to enjoy these products as well.
I think most of the people I spoke with were longtime vegans, but there was at least one person there who had eaten shrimp fairly recently.
Peter Strugatz, and I am here to find out more about New Wave Foods, plant-based seafood, and interested in saving our oceans.
So tell us, you've tried the product. How long has it been since you've eaten actual shrimp?
I'm not a vegetarian, but I prefer to eat vegan. I've had shrimp in the last few months.
So probably more recently than many people at this table. So tell us, how do you feel?
I feel I have a clean conscience and a happy palate. The shrimp industry is so vile and so unhealthy that I have a hard time justifying ordering and eating shrimp anymore. And this really is a equivalent taste sensation.
You know, as I was saying, I haven't eaten shrimp in a long time, but this really felt like it rang that bell for me, and I sense that it did for you as well.
Ding, ding.
So I hope this way of recording this introduction to our interview worked. It was actually, I have to admit, in spite of my severe introversion, or my conviction that I'm severely introverted, which might not be actually totally true. It was kind of fun, actually, and it can be easier somehow to talk to people when you have a microphone in your hand. Maybe I'll just bring the microphone everywhere from now on. So, but maybe I'm not as bad as this as I think I am, or maybe I really am, and this didn't work at all. But in any case, we still have an interview coming, so that's really exciting because I know that's good. And I'm sure at this point your appetite is whetted for more in-depth information. And so upcoming is my interview with Dominique Barnes. She has a master's in marine biodiversity and conservation from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And she started New Wave because she really had, coming from that side, coming from a background in oceanography, she had firsthand experience in seeing how devastating the impacts of commercial seafood production are on the oceans. And she will be joining me right after this.
This episode is brought to you through the generosity of Dr. Bronner's. Dr. Bronner's is a family business committed to making socially and environmentally responsible products of the highest quality and dedicating profits to help make a better world. Dr. Bronner's donates over $500,000 every year to support animal rights organizations and causes. More information about Dr. Bronner's and their vegan fair trade products can be found at drbronner.com. And by the way, I love Dr. Bronner, and it's all I use, and I love what they stand for. Thanks, Dr. Bronner's.
Welcome to our hen house, Dominique.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. I cannot wait to find out about your product. I'm really excited about it. And I'm awestruck by the fact that you have started this incredible business, and that I think is going to be a huge success if I have anything to do with it. And yet your degree is in marine biodiversity and conservation. Did you imagine when you were studying these topics that they would lead you to start a business?
Oh my goodness, that's such a great question, because I did not. I always grew up with a bias almost towards business, as it was, only for the bottom line of profit. And I had no idea that when I was earning a master's degree that I would have been introduced to the idea of creating a sustainable business model, something that can benefit people, planet, and profit. And once I learned about that, I thought, wow, what a powerful tool that we could use to help the ocean or marine life.
Well, it is true that it's a powerful tool, but I'm awestruck that you're doing this without having gone to business school. I mean, the stuff that you learn, you need to really learn a lot of stuff right on the ground, I imagine, because the skills it takes and the knowledge it takes to start a business are not just about why this is so badly needed, but about how to do it. Have you found it challenging?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. There's a lot to starting a business, and in some ways, it is very much on the learning curve for myself because my background is in marine biology, and my career I've spent more time on the water than in front of a computer, or studying things and analyzing pricing and markets. But at the same time, I think that my lack of experience in business maybe attribute to part of our accelerated success. Like, I didn't have that knowledge that could have prevented me for going for something because I didn't know that it was not possible or hard to do. I just kind of blindly went forward and followed my passion. So while it has been challenging being on the learning curve, I think it's worked to my favor overall.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good point. I've heard many people say who were successful that the key to their success was really almost naivete, that they had no idea how hard it was going to be. And so sometimes if you know too much, you get intimidated. But anyway, let's talk about this business. Tell us about New Wave Foods and where it is and what its goals are at the moment.
Sure. One of the reasons why I think getting started was more accessible than if I had just maybe thought of it all by myself was that I built a great team, and we started at an accelerator in San Francisco. So really, we applied to a program called IndieBio. It's a biotechnology accelerator in San Francisco.
Explain to people who aren't familiar what an accelerator is.
Sure. So an accelerator is usually focused on a specific industry, though sometimes they have a little wider scope. And they'll take companies at varying stages and accelerate them or incubate them and kind of connect them with their network, give them resources. For us, for example, we had access to a lab, access to desk space and over a certain period of time. And then on the other end of that accelerator, you would have achieved more than probably by yourself, just being tied to that network. So usually they give you some investment, some capital to work with, and put you in this program. So they're very competitive. IndieBio is the world's leading biotechnology accelerator. So they don't only focus on food, they focus on all things biotechnology. So it was really interesting to be in this cohort of people trying to cure cancer, better map the brain for neuroimaging, skincare, all the way to New Wave Foods, who's trying to disrupt seafood, not oceans.
So why did they decide to get into food?
Well, I think they acknowledge that food is very important part of our future. They're looking at biotechnology to make the world a better place overall for people, and looking at, our finite resources like food, but our increasing human population, and how are we going to scale manufacturing of food to meet the demands of the human population, but in a way that is sustainable. And there's some really exciting technologies out there that IndieBio has supported in the food space. Just in my cohort alone, we had Geltor, which is making gelatin through a really amazing technology. So it's completely animal-free. And Memphis Meats, which you may have heard of, is doing the animal cellular agriculture. So just different approaches to solving these big problems, and food is one of those big problems.
Yeah, Uma was actually on the podcast a while back, and that was very inspiring. And tell us about the proposal you went to them with, and that they obviously got on board with.
Yeah, so we were the only company they accepted as an idea on paper. All the other companies that got in our batch had previous research, previous work done in their business. So we literally had an idea on paper, applied, and when we got accepted, we said, okay, we should incorporate. And our idea initially was a little bit different. So we had an idea to do a shark fin alternative using a technology called recombinant protein. And it's basically, you can program a yeast or a single cell organism to spit out a specific protein like shark fin collagen without actually having to, grow a shark and harvest the collagen. And that was really inspired by, the shark finning industry and how horrible that practice is, and how it really needs to be stopped. So, they liked that idea, they liked the technology behind it, and that's really what got us in.
But now you are working on shrimp?
Yes. So
are you working on shrimp exclusively, or are you still working on the shark fin idea as well?
Shark fin is still in our pipeline. I did a lot of research getting after getting into indie bio, spoke to a lot of people about the shark fin industry and really trying to understand how would we position this product. As you may know, that shark fin is a very cultural dish, mostly in China. And I spoke with people from China, and they told me, while it is still, you still find it in menus, it's actually on the decline because the younger generations don't want it. Basically, it's traditionally served at big celebratory events like a wedding. And now we're kind of at this phase where like the older generations are insisting that it's on the wedding menu, and the younger generations who are getting married, they're saying, no, we don't want this. So there's a shift happening there. Plus, it's a small market in comparison to something like shrimp, which is such a ubiquitous seafood that everybody eats. So it wasn't long before I really understood that if I was to make a huge impact, I really needed to go after something that was bigger than shark fin. And so, surprisingly, the bigger thing there was a little shrimp.
And what stage are you at now?
Well, I'm really excited to share that we started manufacturing, which is a challenge for most companies, especially in food. So we started scaling our product and our formula to food manufacturing. So we're using all natural ingredients, food processing procedures. There's nothing like, sometimes you hear a term frankenfood. This is very like friendly food to eat. And so we're excited to get that up and running. We've done some beta testing here in the Bay Area. So very small amounts here and there, working with chefs and getting great feedback.
And so, excuse my naivete, but it's hard to keep up with all these new foods. And I basically divide them into two categories in my mind. There's the plant-based and the cultured, or what the Good Food Institute likes to call clean, but which is, reproducing actual cells of meat. You talked about this recombinant technology. Where does that fit into or is my dual view of this too naive or too simplistic? And how does this technology fit into that?
I agree with you. I think you can broadly kind of put them in two camps, like things that are more plant-based versus things that are recreating cells that are actual, animal cells, but not from an animal. So you have clean meat on one side and then plant-based on the other side. And I think, the recombinant technology really falls on the clean meat side of things. Even though it's different than cellular agriculture, it's still creating a molecule that's modeled after an animal, and it's identical on the other side, if that makes sense.
Well, I can't say that you've totally clarified it for me, but I'm not sure that's possible. I think you might need a degree to totally clarify it, but I get the basic concept. But I've also heard, and I guess in looking at your materials and whatever, there was talk of algae. Can you tell us the role of algae in your product?
Yeah, so algae is one of the most exciting ingredients in our product.
Oddly enough, I am fascinated by algae.
That's great. I love to meet fellow algae aficionados. I myself really fell in love with algae when I was earning my master's degree. I took a phycology class, which is the study of algae, and it just really opened my mind to the idea that what algae is currently being used for and what it could be used for in the future. So, we're looking at it for so many things, from biofuels to food to cosmetics to cleaning water and air. And even just going way back millions of years ago, algae was the reason why our atmosphere converted from, oh my goodness, I'm going to sound ignorant here, but basically it converted the atmosphere to oxygen that gives us the air that we breathe now. And, there's some statistics out there. It's like every third breath or so that we take comes from the algae in the ocean. So it's an amazing thing on our planet, and it can be used for great things like making an algae and plant-based shrimp. So we're looking at algae as kind of the sea plant component in our plant-based seafood alternatives. Just a little side note, algae is technically not a plant, it's a separate thing, but it does photosynthesize or get its energy from the sun like plants do, so it's very similar.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's not a plant. I'm learning so much during this since I know no science, and we're starting at the beginning. So interesting. So is algae going to save the world?
If I have anything to do with it, it will. And I think it's already starting to. Algae was the mother of all plants, so, they are connected that way too. And, we think about seafood and where does it come from, and like looking at food chains. And the bottom and the base, the structure, the foundation is algae. Like shrimp eat algae. Some of that algae contributes to color and flavor and texture. And, we do some research on those algae, that's another one. My psychology professor would be so mad. Algae is not a word. Algae is the plural. And doing research on the algae, and we learned that, some of the components of the red algae that shrimp eat are a very nutritious ingredient for humans as well. Like it can be a very strong antioxidant. So, in our development process, we're like, why can't we just basically cut out the middleman, like cut out the shrimp, and deliver that benefit of the algae directly to you in a form that is delicious.
It really is amazing, and it's such an amazing concept. I love this idea of thinking of cutting out the middleman. It's not like this is fake. This is just like more efficient. But tell us about, let's get to the more, the questions we can all handle more, and about taste and texture, and even how it looks. Shrimp have a very particular look. How have you worked on getting those things right?
Yeah, it's all of those things. So it's, how does it taste? And taste is all of those things, even the appearance. Like eat with your eyes first. So it has to look good. You have to have the texture, the flavor, the smell, the mouthfeel. There's just so many dynamic things going on there when you're eating something. And we always say the bottom line is it has to taste good. Otherwise, people won't eat it. I mean, we can make a bunch of it. If it doesn't taste good and no one eats it, then what impact are we having? So we had to prioritize some of these things that we were tackling. And the first thing that we prioritized was texture, because we had done some research and learned that some of the other plant-based categories out there, like plant-based chicken or plant-based burgers, even though I think they're getting better and better since from the time I went, vegetarian when I was 13, the feedback a lot of times is like they're very similar. So there's not a lot of differentiation between the textures or flavors of meat alternatives. And so we realized, seafood has a very specific texture, especially shrimp, and we need to get that right first, and then we can kind of massage in the other components. So in the early days when we were at ND Bio, we were in the lab and we're just constantly making iterations of shrimp, which didn't look like shrimp. We were just getting the texture, so they really looked like these like gel blobs or these weird things. And once we got the texture right, we knew then we could start working on appearance and looking at how do we shape it, how do we get the color to look like shrimp, and then go from there.
Yeah, I've had some plant-based shrimp, like in Chinatown or whatever, and the texture was completely off. So I can see how, and it's kind of disgusting because you have to like think about what was it like to bite into a shrimp, and I don't really like thinking about that. But it is a very specific texture. It's firm, but it's not chewy. The ones I've had have been really a little rubbery, I have to admit. So I can see how that would be hard to get. And when you're unlike when you're creating a new food, when you're replicating a food, you have to like really work on getting it exactly the same. So what have the reactions been? And tell us specifically about what happened at Google and what reactions you've had there.
Sure. Honestly, we've done some demos, different pitching events, like our demo day, for example. People knew that it was an algae and plant-based shrimp, but they were really blown away by the texture and taste. Like we had some great articles following our demo day that called our product insanely realistic, and they would switch or consider switching from real shrimp to eating our product. And there are some events where people are just walking by, and maybe we're demoing for another platform, and they don't know us going in. They just think maybe this is a past hors d'oeuvre of shrimp, and we have to tell them like, "Hey, what did you think? Did you like that?" And they said, "Yeah, it's delicious. It's great. What? Why are you asking?" Like, well, it's actually plant and algae based, and they're like, "Oh." And then you see their shift in their mind, like, oh, wait, that wasn't real shrimp. So sometimes people are even like, can not confused, but they think it's shrimp before we tell them what it is. And we had just finished Indie Bio, so it was like a month after, and we had been working with one of their chefs who led the vegan food development at Google, and then he was working with us, and he sent me an email and he said, "Hey, Dominique, our executive chef, we're talking about seafood, and we really want to improve the sustainability profile of our cafeterias, but shrimp is like a kind of a go-to for us. People love it. It's easy for us to use. We can put it in so many dishes, and we're having a hard time finding an alternative that's delicious and nutritious." I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad you asked, because that's exactly what we're working on. And so Michelle and I made up a small batch of our shrimp and brought it to the executive chef.
Who's Michelle?
I'm sorry, Michelle's my co-founder.
Okay.
Michelle Wolf, she's our co-founder and the genius behind our product. So she's a material scientist and engineer from the East Coast. She earned her master's degree from Carnegie Mellon. And so she's really been the one that's mastered this texture and mastered, all these components that we're talking about.
Great. And so you and she went off to Google.
We went off to Google. This is our first time really sitting in front of like an executive chef, so someone who's dedicated their career to being in the culinary world. And we're kind of on the edge of our seats as he takes the first bite. And then I just love watching people's facial reactions, because you could see it on his face. Like, he's like really impressed, and he's like, "Wow, this is really good. I need 200 pounds." And Michelle and I were so excited, and gave each other a high five. But then we're like, "Oh wait, it takes a long time to make one shrimp right now. Where can we meet in the middle?" So we found a place or a number that worked for us. This was our very first order. 200 pounds would have been amazing, but it would have taken us way too long to get that much made. But we were able to do it, and we demoed at the Google cafeteria, and we did a shrimp taco, and they did such a beautiful job preparing it. It was delicious, and people were coming back in line to grab seconds. So it was so much fun to work with them.
That's really exciting. That must have been a thrill. But speaking of the 200 pounds and how difficult it is, what are the issues? How are you dealing with issues of scaling? And people I've had on before have talked about that. It's one thing to invent the product; it's a whole other thing to scale the product, and also which goes along with that pricing.
Yeah, exactly. All of that's kind of rolled into one thing. Okay, great. You've developed this shrimp in the lab. Now what? It's a whole nother process and challenge to tackle to scale it and to make sure you maintain the quality and visual and taste and texture and all those things you work so hard to achieve. Scaling that, you're introducing new things that could change the quality, and you really want to preserve the quality. So, for us, we really want to get the product out there. That's the way we can make an impact. I think if we took 5 years in R&D and then another 2 or 3 years to build maybe our own manufacturing facility, that would have taken a lot of time and a lot of capital. And we knew what we were designing. We designed it to be manufacturable, if that makes sense. So we knew this is a new process. It's not like people are making it, but we always kept that in mind, that we needed to take advantage of things that are already out there, and we could piece it together and make it happen. So, I think that made our manufacturing journey a little more challenging, because it wasn't like we could go to, it's not like we're making granola and we can say, "Hey, you make granola. Here's our new recipe. Can you make a new recipe for us?" It's like, "Hey, we're making something completely brand new, and we're wondering if you could work with us." But luckily, we found some great partners that allowed us to scale our product and our formula. And, instead of taking, I think it took us 3 days to make 30 pounds for Google. Now we're making, I think it's 200 pounds an hour. So it's great. And it's just a small step. Like, you can imagine, that could go really quickly. When Google's first order was 200 pounds, the demand is really high. So we're still working on increasing our volume.
That's really, really exciting to hear. Before we've been talking a lot about the product, but I haven't yet really asked you a lot about the reasons. And since that is where your background is, in marine biology, let's talk a little bit about shrimp. And clearly you haven't chosen the animal of the highest sentience. with shrimp. I don't know a lot about shrimp sentience, but that's clearly only one of the issues that is involved here. But let's talk about that issue since this is our hen house. What is the story on the sentience of shrimp? What's going on with shrimp? How much do we know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I think it's debatable if, what level of sentience they have.
Yeah, I understand that, it's hard to answer any of these questions definitively.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I mean, even outside of that, like if you're talking to maybe just kind of your average person who isn't as, animal minded as we might be, they're not even the charismatic megafauna, as we call it in the marine conservation world. They're not this adorable dolphin or, charismatic blue whale. They're a shrimp. I mean, they kind of look like bugs to some people, and they, they're not that approachable from, that standpoint. But the reality of the shrimp industry really is the worst. It really has dirty secrets tucked in there. And it's our favorite seafood. We eat it more than anything else by far in America. Plus, it's enjoyed around the world. And I think, we've just consumed it at such a rate that we almost lost sight that shrimp was a delicacy at one point. It wasn't that long ago, like I think in the 50s, were people hosting really nice cocktails, and it was the treat to have a shrimp cocktail there.
Yeah,
but
I can actually attest to that since I go back to the 50s. And a shrimp cocktail before a meal was a very big deal. That was a very, very fancy thing to get. It's like the most expensive thing. So,
right.
Yes. And I have to say that, I hate to think of my animal eating history, but I loved shrimp. I mean, everybody loved shrimp. So I can see why it became so much more popular. And maybe it was because it didn't seem so much like an animal to me, though I ate other animals too. So I'm giving myself more credit than I deserve. But as you point out, it's not really usually what people argue about is not the welfare of the shrimp themselves, because we don't know that much about it, but there's so many other harms. And can you tell us a little bit about what harm the shrimp industry does?
Sure. I mean, so really shrimp come from two main places. You can get wild caught. So, fishermen out on boats collecting it from the ocean, or farmed. And both of those practices have a lot of things that are concerning. We always talk about health, like our health as we consume it, environment, and social justice. So for our health, I mean, it's really hard to go shrimp by shrimp and say, like, what's in it? There was the Consumer Reports did a test on shrimp not too long ago and bought some from Whole Foods to Walmart. I think they took at least 20 samples and analyzed just what was on the shrimp, what came in with the shrimp, and they found that there were things like illegal antibiotics, cockroach legs, rat hair. So just the health for yourself. I mean, eating something that has all of these things hidden in it, you don't want to eat that. It's not good for you. Why would we want to be eating these antibiotics that are illegal? And they're using them not on the shrimp actually, but on the pig farms that are upstream from the shrimp farms. So the pig farms waste goes down to the shrimp, and the shrimp eat that, and then that's how the antibiotics get into the shrimp. So just eating it, like the health-wise, that's not good for anybody. Then environmentally, if you look at shrimp farming, in the past, they've done a lot of deforestation of mangrove forests. And mangroves are almost like the rainforest along the coast. So they act as, ecosystem habitats. They're nurseries for fish. They really support diversity in, species around that area and even in the ocean. And they act as like a natural buffer to the land. So you can imagine, like, if a big tropical storm or tsunami's coming in, these trees can mitigate some of the impact. But now that they're gone, the coastal community is completely exposed. And then if you look at wild caught, I mean, shrimp fishing has some of the highest bycatch numbers out there. I've read, different studies, and it's up to 15 pounds of other animals that are caught for 1 pound of shrimp.
Good Lord.
So,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's so inefficient and so, just heartbreaking to hear about. And sometimes people don't know what bycatch is, but bycatch are the unintended animals. So you can imagine a net that's designed to catch shrimp. Shrimp are very small, so the holes in the net have to be small. Anything bigger than that that's in the way gets caught. And some of these shrimp nets or trawls can be, the size of multiple football fields, and they just drop them along the bottom and kind of scoop as they go. One of the more heartbreaking stories that's happening right now that the shrimp industry is connected to is the vaquita. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not.
So the vaquita is the world's smallest cetacean. It's a small porpoise, and it lives in Baja, California. And it's been threatened by the fishing industry. So they're very niche. They're very small. They have very specific behaviors and patterns. And in that same area in Baja California, or in the Gulf of California, there's shrimp industry and a totoaba industry, and both of those have really driven the decline in the vaquita population. So at the beginning of 2017, I think there were 30 left, and now recent reports came out there might be 15 left. So it could be even by the end of this year we see this animal extinct. So just the bycatch alone from fishing industry, but especially shrimp industry, is just very devastating.
Aren't there a lot of human rights problems within the shrimp industry as well? Haven't I read that?
Yes, exactly. So that's exactly where I'm headed. So now we have, this huge demand. Like we said, it was a delicacy, but now shrimp seems to be everywhere. You could see it in fast food restaurants. And to get that, we had to scale the farming and to process that in such a way to make it the price affordable for things like a fast food menu. Slavery is involved. So, you have these huge farms and people need to process the shrimp and clean them and deshell them, what have you. But to get people to do it in such a rate to make the price attractive, they enslave people. So, the Associated Press just did an expose on this. There is a great book called, I think it's Blood World, that also covers this phenomenon that's happening today. And basically, they'll go and they'll talk to people and they'll say, poorer families, and say, hey, we have a job for you, or we have a job for your 12-year-old. Come over for the summer. We'll pay them a fair wage. They'll have plenty of food to eat because we're, working as seafood. And we'll come back at the end of the summer and you guys will be all better for it. But once the person gets there, they don't pay them, they don't feed them, and they work them day in and day out in really horrible conditions. And so they're essentially trapped as a slave because they have no resources to escape.
Yeah, I've always heard that there are huge problems in the shrimp industry, and they're apparently even huger than I realized. Even so in discussing with people who aren't vegan or who wouldn't even think of being vegan, why not eat shrimp? There's many, many reasons aside from the fact that you're harming an animal. And and all of those reasons are reasons to use your products, of course. So tell us when people who are listening to this will be able to get New Wave shrimp.
Yeah, we're working hard to get it out there. I know there's a lot of people excited to try it. I'm excited to try it.
Hello, I'm excited.
We'll get some to you as soon as we can. Like I said, we're working on manufacturing and scaling that up now. And we're hoping that, in the very near future, we'll have some that people can buy one way or another. We're exploring different ways to do that. And it won't be long. I don't want to promise a date and then
all right.
not hit it, but I know it won't be long.
Setting goals is important, though.
We do definitely have some goals.
So what's it going to look like? Is it going to be like a bag of frozen shrimp that you would then use in your own recipes, or is it going to be a pre-cooked kind of product?
Yeah,
that you just heat up.
Yeah. So right now, when our beta testing and working with chefs, it's a little different than, say, like something that you might buy at a grocery store for your home cooking. But we do have shrimp two ways, if you will. So right now we have a crispy shrimp that you would, just kind of heat and toss into your favorite dish. So you could, heat it on the skillet or put it in the oven or a toaster oven and just kind of warm it up, crisp it up, and then toss it in like anything. We've used it in stir fry, tacos, nachos, just kind of anything that you would put shrimp in. And it's very delicious. And then another way that we're working on right now is a raw shrimp. And that was really designed from the feedback from our chefs. Like the chefs working with our product, they're saying, hey, like the breaded and crispy is great, but I want to add my own breading, or I want to do it a couple different ways. And so this raw version allows them a little more culinary creativity, and they cook it just like a real shrimp. So they have to make sure it gets to an internal temperature of like 160, but then they can put it in a curry or a pasta dish and get really creative with it. And so I think something very similar to that will be available to people like you and me who just go grocery shopping most of the time.
Oh, that sounds great. I can't wait. Thank you so much for doing this. You're going to be adding so much to my life. Just please do it as soon as possible. One thing one of my listeners asked me to ask you, and I want to, I mean, we need to go, I know, but just before we go, there's been all this labeling issues recently about pushback from the industry, particularly milk industry, about labeling things milk. What are you calling your shrimp, and do you see problems? I mean, the industry is obviously getting very nervous.
Gosh, yeah. What a great question. And I think, we are coming in at a time where we have some things to look to, like milk or cheese, and labeling those things and like the pushback they've received. I know mayo was a big one not that long ago.
Of course.
And yeah, exactly. And, I'm sure we'll get some pushback, but we're calling it shrimp. And, obviously with the, line below it saying that it's plant and algae based. But I think, that's what's working for us so far. That's how people are understanding it and accepting it. And we're going to roll with that.
That's good. I'm glad. And of course, none of these products are deceptive in any way. It's completely obvious. That's why people buy them, is because they're plant-based. So
right.
Hopefully these efforts on the part of industry will fade. But in any case, no matter what it's called, I want it. So get back to work, Dominique. Get off the phone.
I'm on it.
Thanks so much for doing this. I'm sure people are going to be really excited to hear about this. I'm just very excited about your company for so many reasons, and can't wait to try some shrimp.
Yeah, and if you or your followers want more New Way Foods information, we have a great newsletter that goes out. So if they go to our website, newwayfoods.com, they can sign up for it there. We also have a blog that I do my best to add to as much as possible. So if you want some insights on our journey, and then we're on all of your other favorite social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at New Way Foods.
That's great. Okay. I'm sure we'll all be keeping track. Thanks so much for joining us today on our Hen House, Dominique.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Hello, this is Jaya Bamitra. I'm the International Director of Corporate Outreach for Animal Equality, an international organization working with society, governments, and companies to end cruelty to farmed animals. In addition, I'm thrilled that this year I'll be one of the judges for the Pollination Project's Lisa Shapiro Awards. The Lisa Shapiro Awards acknowledge the unsung heroes of our global movement. Those animal rights volunteers who work behind the scenes without all the praise and glory to make the world a better place for animals. Anyone can nominate their favorite unsung animal activist at thepollinationproject.org/Lisa. Nominations are open until August 15th. The other judges and I will be looking forward to reading more about their work. Thanks for sharing with us these special people who work so hard on behalf of animals. We can't wait to recognize them for their commitment and achievements.
Now let's get right into the news. Our first story is from NPR, and it's about what's going. We've talked about this story before, but I think there's been a little bit more progress, so we'll talk about it again. This story is entitled Purdue Farms Signs Up for a Chicken Welfare Revolution. And, I have to quibble with that title. I don't think we could call this a revolution, but it is pretty remarkable, the changes that Purdue is making. And it's not like the whole chicken industry is doing this. Purdue is kind of seeing the writing on the wall, I think, and making some, as this article put it, it is breaking ranks with the rest of the industry. So the improvements kind of demonstrate how bad things are. All right, they have windows. They didn't have windows before. So natural light is a nice thing, and it's good. There is a report in this article that the chickens are moving around a lot more. They're flapping their wings. They're running around. And in addition to the windows, the natural light, and more room. They have a new slaughtering process that uses gas to make the birds unconscious before they're killed. And if you know anything about the current slaughtering processes, since chickens are not covered by the Humane Slaughter Act, and it is not necessary that they be rendered unconscious before their throats are slit, this new slaughtering process is almost certainly better than what happens now. And they are also trying to use different breeds of chickens. This is much more obscure and vague, and the commitments are not very clear. But as you know, the chickens that they currently use have been bred to grow so fast that they have horrific health problems and really live in just constant pain. They are in a prison made of their bodies. So, and their bones have a hard time supporting their weight. And so they're working on slower growing birds. And that, of course, is an expense to the industry. And they don't really have, it's the Global Animal Partnership that is negotiating these changes. And they don't even have the breeds defined yet, which they will be using. I know this is all depressing talking about this because it's all just so distasteful. And like, why don't they just stop eating these poor things, these poor creatures completely? But I think it's important for us all to stay up to date on this kind of news. And our second story is a better food product than dead birds. And this is an article from Fortune magazine. Anytime an article is in Fortune, you know that, big money is starting to pay attention. Plants are invading the meat aisle at Kroger. And if you recall, we had Ethan Brown on from Beyond Meat not too long ago, really, and he was talking about his main goal in life was to get Beyond Burgers into mainstream grocery stores. He was in Whole Foods. Since then, he got into Safeway, and now he is in Kroger's, which is apparently the largest supermarket in the U.S. And his goal was to get these burgers in the meat aisle, where they can compete with meat, where he said they do so much better. Like, he didn't have the exact numbers, or he couldn't disclose the exact numbers, but he said it was staggering, the difference in how many of them they could sell. And so I'm glad to tell you that what Ethan Brown said on the podcast has come to pass. He is a dynamic guy, and he is making things happen. And these burgers are going to be sold in the meat aisle at Kroger's. Every time I post stories like this, I have a lot of enthusiasm and then some complaints from some vegans who say they don't want to go to the meat aisle. Well, it's not about you. It's about the cows. And if we can sell fewer dead animals and more Beyond Burgers, that's who it's about. And if we have to go to the meat aisle to do that, we'll just hold our nose and go there and grab our burgers, which I understand are pretty hard to grab as soon as they put them out. I've heard in many stores, as soon as they put them out, they disappear. Next story, another burger story. Impossible Foods tastes $75 million for its meatless burger. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Notice how recently, all the news stories are coming from the financial press. So interesting. So yeah, Impossible Foods, which has raised a lot of money before, has just raised another $75 million. And they are on the edge of expanding exponentially. Among the investors, Bill Gates, Khosla Ventures, Horizons Ventures. These are big, big money. And this brings the total funding in the company to $257 million. And if you haven't seen an Impossible Burger yet, it's because they are still in the process of ramping up. They are it'll be later this fall, and they're going to be launching their production facility in California, and they will be making 1.4 million pounds of this quote-unquote plant-based meat a month, every month. Currently, they're making 8,000 pounds a month. They're moving up to 1.4 million pounds. Is this a growth industry or what? Finally, our last story, getting away from animal-based meat and fake meat. This is about puppies and Miami. This story is from the Miami Herald. Miami cracks down on pet shops with new law. Miami is the latest city to ban the sale of dogs and cats. Not completely. Some cities are doing it completely. They are banning the sale of dogs and cats from substandard breeding facilities, which are defined in this article as mass breeders and puppy mills. So, of course, that takes a little bit more enforcement than just out-and-out bans. They are hoping that dogs and cats from shelters and rescues will be sold, but also county-regulated breeders. So there will be a level of breeder that will be allowed to sell puppies, but this is still terrific news. These puppy mills are they are really taking a hit. Of course, it's still very easy to get a puppy from a puppy mill. They're sold online. If one city bans them, that doesn't mean that, you can't get them nearby. But some great quotes in this article, particularly from Vice Chairman Ken Russell, who sponsored the law in the Miami City Council. And he said, "We can't control the supply, but we can control the demand." And that's great. They really can. They can control the demand in Miami. And as he points out, quote, "The world is watching us right now. I believe that many cities across the country are deciding whether they want to be the cities of tomorrow or the cities of yesterday." God, I love that quote. Well said. Finally, a little news about us. We have been nominated, both the Our Hen House podcast and the Animal Law podcast, which I hope you're also listening to, for Veggie Awards from Veg News. And we're very, very excited. And we really, really hope that you will go and vote for us. There's also loads of other of your favorite vegan products and services that you can vote for there. But the URL is, I'll just read it, www.surveymonkey.com/r/Veggie Awards. But, you don't have to memorize the URL. Just search for Veggie Awards 2017, and they will come up. And please vote for us. We would love that so much. And that's it for this week's news.
Hi, I'm Liz Ross, co-founder of Vegan Advocacy Initiative. We are advocates for vegans of color and for the animals. And we also organize the People of Color Animal Rights Advocacy and Food Justice Conference. This year, I am one of the judges for the Pollination Project's Lisa Shapiro Awards. And we want you to nominate those animal rights activists, superheroes around the world, who are working behind the scenes to create a better world for the animals, to stop their suffering and exploitation. We want them to know that their work is truly appreciated. So please go to thepollinationproject.org/Lisa to make your nomination before August 15th. Again, that's thepollinationproject.org/Lisa.
Next up, my co-host here on Our Hen House, Jasmine Singer, who is, of course, in addition to hosting on Our Hen House, also the author of Always Too Much and Never Enough. She'll be joined by longtime vegan activist Erik Marcus about one of his books. Erik not only maintains the incredibly important website and information source on everything vegan, vegan.com. Nice URL, right? vegan.com. Easy to remember. But what we really are, or what Jasmine is really talking to him about today, is his book, Self-Care for Activists, A Guide to Clearing Yourself of Trauma While Working for a Better World. And this is really an invaluable guide for any activist on how to take care of themselves. It's not a long book. It's really, well, if it was a novel, it would be a novella. I'm not sure what you call a nonfiction. Actually, what Erik calls it is a lengthy essay by lifelong animal advocate Erik Marcus on how to overcome the various personal challenges that confront activists. And it really is invaluable, as I said. But what's more, it's free. So, it's an incredible bargain. It can be downloaded for free on Amazon. And I just really think you'll be heading right there to get it after you hear Jasmine and Erik's conversation.
Welcome to our hen house, Erik.
Hey, boy, am I happy to be here.
Or should I say welcome back to our hen house, because you've been on.
Yeah, 34 years ago.
Or like 2010 probably. It's been a while.
My addition isn't very good.
But we're sitting at the Saturn Diner in Santa Cruz, California right now, and it's exciting to be able to interview you in person. I always enjoy when you come through town. I think the last time that I saw you, we might have taken a long walk on a short wharf or something.
Yep, we took a long walk off a short pier and at the Santa Cruz Municipal Wharf, and yeah, what a lovely place that is. I recommend it to any and all who are passing through Santa Cruz.
And you are the mastermind behind vegan.com, but I'm not allowed to talk about vegan.com.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm chronically frustrated about the overall quality of vegan.com, but it does incrementally improve from one week to the next.
No, you have a phenomenal phenomenal viewpoint on all things vegan, and you're the genius who actually bought vegan.com. How did that happen?
Well, I this was just as the internet was getting big and people were just starting to know what .coms were. And if I had $13 a couple of years earlier, I would have bought it when it was available. But I was like, I'd written a book called Vegan, the New Ethics of Eating. It needed to be promoted. And so there was a person who had the domain who had no plans to use it. So I approached him and I was like, hey, I've been really writing and researching veganism for quite a while, and I think I could really do something with the domain. And this guy just really wanted to make sure that it ended up in the right hands. It's somebody who really was pushing veganism for the right reasons. So I sent him a copy of a draft of my book, and he read it through, and he was like, wow, I really like this. And so he just, gave it to me for an embarrassingly small amount of money. And I guess the one cool thing I could say about it is that a few years later, he got in touch with me, and he was like, hey, I'm really happy that I did the sale to you because I'm really happy the direction you've taken it in.
And what direction have you taken it in? What does vegan.com do in the world?
Well, I think that, what I'm trying to do with it, veganism has in general always had kind of a credibility problem in that, frankly, a lot of the vegan books, I don't care if we're talking about the health side or the advocacy side, but, a lot of our scholarship has not been all that it could or should be, and some of it has been due to, a lack of understanding about some of the core issues. Some of it has been due to a lack of integrity in making the most honest arguments we can make. I've always thought that, hey, the arguments for being vegan are fantastic, so there's no reason to cut corners when it comes to choosing what we're going to talk about. I think what I've always tried to do actually is to adopt an anti-vegan bias when thinking about how I'm going to argue the vegan issues. And if I can take a flamethrower to the vegan arguments and then see what stands after I am unfairly harsh with those arguments, then that means, hey, these are arguments we can take to the masses, and we know that nobody can poke holes in them.
And you actually have a book that I wanted to chat with you a little bit about now, which is called Self-Care for Activists. You write in your book, effective animal advocacy is, in the end, a product of a gentle spiritual grounding that transforms the activist first and our brutal world second. As you begin to understand that the fate of countless billions of animals requires as much internal contemplation as external action, you'll relax into a fuller picture of what's actually occurring and how to best encourage change. Can you speak to that a bit, about what you mean when you talk about how we need grounding first and then we can approach the change-making endeavors that we hope to achieve in this brutal world?
Well, I think this gets to the idea of, can you just be comfortable by being uncomfortable? Can you just slow down your breathing? Can you allow yourself to actually feel the hurt you're feeling on the animal's behalf? There's just so much that is so deeply painful about about knowing what's happening to animals, and instead of having a knee-jerk reaction of pushing it away and thinking that it's up to the world to change right now, can you relax and feel the discomfort of just how profoundly messed up everything is, and in allowing yourself to feel that sadness, to feel that turmoil, to feel that pain, you're taking some of that in and then you're breathing it out, and in doing that, I think that transforms you into the kind of being who can more readily encourage change, because you've actually absorbed a part of what's so distinctly troublesome.
So let's talk similarly about doing less as a means to do more, because I know that's something that you're also passionate about, that you talk about in your book, that you talk about in conversation. And, from my perspective, I think doing more is doing more. And I understand in theory that maybe it's more effective for some to do less, but how does that result in more effective activism? What do you mean when you say doing less is doing more?
Well, so let me just give you an example from the world of investing. A lot of people are really into the idea of diversifying. If I do loads and loads and loads of research on various stocks, I can pick out 10 different stocks that I know a fair amount about, and I can put 10% of my portfolio into each of them. And I know a decent amount about each of these stocks, so I'll just put 10% in each, and we'll see how my portfolio does. Well, imagine if instead of putting, 100 hours a month into that kind of work, I just put 30 hours a month into really trying to figure out the best 2 stocks instead of the best 10. And I put all, and I knew each of these 2 stocks 5 times better than I could know these 10 other stocks. Well, at that point, I could have a portfolio of only 1 or 2 stocks, but I know them inside out, and and I've only put a relatively small amount of energy into this, and they will outperform, the kinds of stocks I would choose if I were on some treadmill and trying to evaluate a whole bunch of different things. I think one of the things that vegan activists don't tend to do is to just think in terms of opportunity cost. We only have so many hours in the day, so what can we do that will deliver the greatest possible payoff? And that comes to probably writing down, I use index cards. I write down my ideas onto index cards. And then once I've emptied my brain onto index cards, and I have 20, 30, 40 cards, I'll look through those cards, and in just a matter of days, it becomes really clear that of these 40 ideas, 20 of them are terrible and need to be torn up, and another 10 aren't really that great. But I have 10 ideas that are really good. So, and then of those 10 ideas, it quickly becomes clear that this idea is the best idea I've had all year. Well, why don't I put 80% of my energy into this one idea? The difference between spending, the majority of your time working on your very best idea versus the majority of your time working on your 5th best idea is the difference between driving around in a Datsun 510 and driving around in a Tesla. It's like what you will end up achieving, accomplishing, and enjoying when you are working on what is far and away your best idea just puts everything else to shame. And I think, the thing is, vegan advocacy in some ways is sort of the epitome of anti-capitalism. But one of the things that I kind of aspired to when I was in my teens, I wanted to be a millionaire. And then in my 20s, I kind of lost interest in that because I found out what was happening to animals. But then once I found out what was happening to animals, I realized that, well, now I really want to be a millionaire. I want to, but not in terms of dollars earned, in terms of animals saved. I want to save millions and millions of animals from going to a slaughterhouse. And in order to do that, I needed to be working on my very, very, very best idea. So in order to figure out what your very best idea is, I would recommend emptying your brain, spending 10 minutes every morning just writing down a bunch of ideas onto index cards, and then periodically going through them and figuring out, which ideas suck, which ideas are good, and lo and behold, which idea is the best idea you've had this whole year.
I think that's wise. Wise words. And there's so many wise words in your book, Self-Care for Activists. You suggest becoming a student of advocacy, which I really love. And you get into specific meditation ideas and specific yoga exercises. You talk about the value of combining self-care with activism, which I think will be really useful to people listening to this. And, you know what's going on. You are a person who really strongly prioritizes how to be as effective as we possibly can. So I'm really excited about your book and about all the work you're doing. I want you to just give me one more little nugget here, Erik, which is, for all you've seen in all of your years as an animal rights activist, what are you most excited about these days in our movement?
Well, I think we're absolutely reaching a tipping point, and I think that maybe the thing I'm most excited about is that, on the one hand, I don't think that there's any way in the world that we're going to have a vegan world in 5 or 10 years. And I think to aspire to that is to be out of touch with reality, however much we would want that. It's just not going to happen. We're too far away. But I think that we are we're on the brink of something that is incredibly substantial, which will doom animal agribusiness as we know it. And that is just the idea that while most people are not receptive to going vegan in the foreseeable future, almost anybody can be convinced that it is a wise and prudent idea to cut back significantly on the animal products they consume. And there's a really cool book out called Reducitarian, and that kind of gets to the heart of that matter. And the fact is that once you can get somebody to buy into the concept of reducitarianism, then you've got a foot in the door. That door is only going to open wider because now your foot's in the door. If we can get our foot in the door with something like reducitarianism, then the sky's the limit. Reducitarianism today leads to dairy-free tomorrow, which leads to no more, chicken the next month, which leads to no more fish the next month. And then, lo and behold, you're within spitting distance of going vegan. But, the thing is, the thing that vegans don't tend to respect is the idea that for most people, veganism is so impossibly far away. It's just cold, shark-infested waters to a shore that you can't even see. And the reducitarian canoe can bring you a lot within sight of that shore. And you can just paddle up pretty effortlessly until that shore is an easy swim away. So that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And do you have any final departing words for us? Not that you're departing.
The one thing we didn't mention is that my Self-Care for Activists book is free.
That's it. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, and you could just download that on Amazon.
Amazon or Google Play or Apple iBooks or Barnes & Noble Nook. My God.
Well, Barnes & Noble Nick.
No, yeah. So anyway, all those platforms, the ebook is free and you can read it in about 45 minutes.
Why'd you make it free?
because I didn't need the money, and I really wanted to, if it could really help somebody, I didn't want to ransom it off.
Well, it was fun sitting with you in this booth at Saturn Diner in Santa Cruz, California, 95060, and I'm looking forward to the next time that we can take a walk on a wharf. You inspire me endlessly. I am a big fan of your work and your book, so thank you so much for joining me today in our hen house.
Oh, it's been a delight.
Our hen house has a flock, and we'd love you to be in it. A one-time donation of $150 or more makes you a flock member for a year, or you can sign up for a month-to-month membership for $15 a month. We will not only send you a Change the World for Animals sticker, but you will have access to our flock-only Facebook group, where you'll get the inside scoop from Our Hen House coop. Are we overdoing the hen analogies? Cluck, no. And more important, this is where flock members squawk about everything from their favorite books to their latest encounter with hostile meat eaters. There's nothing like community to make you feel a little more at home in a sometimes pretty difficult world. Anxieties are rising. Our first story is a beaut. Love this story. You might have seen it, but maybe you didn't look at it in detail, and the details are so entertaining. It's from Metro in the UK. This is a UK story. The title of the story here is "The Dairy Industry Tried to Block This Vegan Advert from Appearing." And this is an advertisement that was put forth by an organization called Go Vegan World, and it's about dairy, and it has a picture of a cow behind a piece of barbed wire. And the headline is, "Humane milk is a myth, don't buy it." And then underneath in smaller print, it says, I'm going to read the whole thing. "I went vegan the day I visited a dairy. The mothers, still bloody from birth, searched and called frantically for their babies. Their daughters, fresh from their mothers' wombs but separated from them, trembled and cried piteously, drinking milk from rubber teats on the wall instead of their mothers' nurturing bodies, all because humans take their milk. The sons are slaughtered for their flesh, and they themselves are slaughtered at 6 years. Their natural lifespan is 25 years. I could no longer participate in that. Can you?" So this is a very hard-hitting ad, and the dairy industry in the UK was very upset by it. But and they wanted to argue to the organization or the agency that governs the truthfulness of advertisements. It's called the Advertising Standards Authority. And the Advertising Standards Authority received a number of complaints, and they all wanted to argue that this ad was misleading. And of course, that's hard to do because, as we know, this is what dairy is. And so their argument is that there are regulations governing the dairy industry that from the Department for Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs that require that the cow and the calf cannot be separated for at least 12 and preferably 24 hours after birth. That's it. That's their big argument, that this implied to people that these calves and their mothers were separated during that period, at least 12 and preferably 24 hours after birth. There's nothing in the ad that says when the calves are separated from their mothers. And, that's what actually the Advertising Standards organization decided, that what are you going to do? It's not true. It could be implying that some dairy farms might be violating those regulations, but there's nothing really in there that says that these quote unquote animal welfare standards are being violated. It's just, this is the way they do it, and they're just telling the truth. Is that the most entertaining story? Boy, like, good work from this organization, Go Vegan World, and a great result. And getting not only telling the truth, but getting an actual body that reviews advertising to say, well, yeah, what are you going to do? This is the truth. I love that story. All right, our next story is from the Cattle Network, and we frequently report on stories written by Dan Murphy at the Cattle Network, and the title of this one is Meat of the Matter, Alt Meat Marketing. And alt meat is one of Dan's names for cultured meat or clean meat, as the Good Food Institute calls it, meat made without animals. And he's concerned about it. And he's talking about, what are the reasons that investors are really interested in this? Quote, despite all the blather about saving the environment, freeing the world's livestock, and feeding 9 billion people on planet Earth with nothing more than a bunch of test tubes, tanks actually, some growth media, and what would apparently be a bunch of gigantic factories, the people pushing the potential of sham burgers and bogus meat, those are his real names for it, are actually focused on a much more primal purpose, making money. Yeah. So what? Are we isn't that the American way? Isn't that what's cool about it? That these people are going to get crazy rich off of it? Since when is making money a sin in the United States of America? And then he goes on to really attack Whole Foods because John Mackey has really come out in favor of this kind of animal-free meat and the prospect of Hampton Creek producing it in the near future. And he says here, the fact that 99% of the world can't afford to shop at Whole Foods and won't be able to afford the coming wave of alt meat products doesn't concern the investors who stand to cash in on cultured meat. Well, actually, it does concern them. I'm sure they'd much rather be selling to 100% of the world's population than 1%. But he's sure that this is just all a scam. And the whole idea here is create the perception of value and market it to people who are able to pay for it. Well, Dan, maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe the price will never come down. But you know what? I'm betting on the price coming down. And so are all these investors. They're not deceived by the idea that this is going to be expensive forever. And just because Whole Foods is involved doesn't mean that it is. So they're worried, and apparently the meat industry is becoming the bulwark against capitalism. They're against people making money. All right, finally, our third story is from Plant-Based News. So obviously they're only reporting on the rising anxieties. They are not an evidence of the rising anxieties. And the title of the story is KFC, quote, nothing but the chicken advert actually pro-vegan. And this apparently, I haven't seen this ad, but apparently KFC has some new ad out, and it shows this normal, healthy chicken dancing around this space to DMX's X Gon' Give It To Ya. And, apparently their idea is that they're trying to show people that when they eat KFC, they are eating 100% chicken. But there have been a lot of really interesting reactions to this. Of course, PETA said, we could have put that ad out. That's pretty weird because, we're trying to show people that chicken, as in KFC's chicken, is made out of chickens. So that's interesting. She is upset. The PETA spokeswoman, Elisa Allen, is upset that they kind of are deceptive about the lives that these chickens are living. But, basically, it's a good thing that they're showing that it's made out of chicken. But the meat eaters, the people who eat this stuff, are upset about it. Some meat eaters have reacted to the advert by saying they don't want to be reminded they are eating an animal. Okay. Yeah, I bet they don't. So another person commented, is it just me who thinks the new KFC ad is wrong? They're pretty much showing off the happy chickens they're essentially going to slaughter. And another tweet here, I know it's hypocritical, but I hate the new KFC advert, reminding me it's real chickens I'm eating. Well, we're seeing this is an instance of rising anxieties on the part of the consumers. Get with it, people. That's what you're eating. What do you think you're eating when you eat chicken? You don't realize you're eating chickens? Of course, people like to put their head in the sand, no doubt about it. And, it's interesting. This article asks, was KFC expecting this kind of reaction? I doubt they were, but they do like that there's, any kind of controversy is always good for anything. Well, not any kind of controversy, but, the fact that it's being talked about does mean that they're getting more attention. But their chief of marketing says it goes a little further than that. She says that at KFC, we're proud of our chicken. We're not afraid to show it. while much of the response generated has been negative, according to advertising magazine Adweek, the brand is still standing behind the ad. Interesting. Like, do they really think this is going to work? Do they really think that people want to see the reality of the animals that they're eating? Interesting. I bet people don't, and the reaction to this has shown that they don't. But, according to KFC, quote, the whole chicken represents a step change for us, taking a bolder stance when it comes to engaging with our loyal customers and fans. We'll be interested to see how this plays out, because I think the way it's going to play out is people are going to stop eating chicken. And that's it for this week's Rising Anxieties.
Did you know that you can dedicate a podcast episode to someone you love? For $200, you can not only honor a loved one, human or non, but at the same time support our Hen House's efforts to change the world for animals. And as a bonus, we'll throw in a 1-year flock membership. Our Hen House is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we rely on your contributions to support our efforts to change the world for animals. We've been on the air every single week without missing one since January 2010. For more information on how to dedicate a podcast episode or just to throw us some cash, visit ourhenhouse.org/donate.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks to my co-host, Jasmine Singer, our production staff, Michael Herron and John Frusciante. And as always, if you like the podcast, please support it. You can leave a good review on iTunes, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter or Instagram. If you shop on Amazon, you can use Amazon Smile using our Hen House as your favorite charity. Best of all, you can support us financially by making a donation or joining our flock, which would be really great, at our henhouse.org/donate. We love to have more flock members, and we love to have people chatting away on our flock page. If you are one of our listeners who already do support us, and especially if you are a flock member, thank you so much. You are one of the very special ones, and we love you. We'll be back next week with a brand new show, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. And in the meantime, keep doing whatever it is that you do to change the world for animals, because you are all that they've got.